Hello again. So I want to go through some of the older sand wedges pre-1956. They're of historical interest, and if you aren't interested in history, just go ahead and skip this episode 11, but it will be one of the shorter episodes. I think it's interesting, and I'm going to show you 5 wedges from pre-1956. I've got a couple from the 30s that I want to show you. Here's a 1937 sand iron dot punch face. It's got quite a bit of bounce. It's got a very wide sole. You can kind of see the bounce there, and it has a fake wood shaft called Pyrotone. It's plastic over metal pin shaft. Got the original leather grip, very long grip. Older, the Dynapowers that I'm talking about from the 50s through the 70s had long grips, very, longer than today. Today, it might be only that long, something like that. Dynapowers, might have been that long, and then these from the 30s were even longer, and I think it's maybe because they like to do a lot of choking down for their delicate shots. I'm not completely sure, but certainly the grips were longer then than they are now. Here is a 1930s dot punch pitching iron, pitching, not sand. Huge negative bounce, and again, that would be for extracting the ball from tight lies. Got the brown shaft again. I've got a newer grip on this. You can see the gap between the new grip and the original grip, and it's the forerunner of the negative bounce pitching wedges that I was just talking about. I'm going to jump forward now. Oh, one more. Here's a 37 with score lines for the grooves, and they are 21 score lines. This has, and I should mention this has the now illegal reminder grip where you've got a flat side on the grip, and that even was used into the 50s and 60s. So one thing, if you're buying a club and you want to play it, you're not going to be able to, if you're in any kind of competition, leave that so-called reminder grip. This gives you a view of the profile. You're not going to be able to leave that reminder grip on. Not a real big deal because grips are pretty easy to replace. Here are a couple of sand irons from 1954 maybe. They're both very heavy. I think one of these has got an F swing weight. The weight is concentrated very much down low. They've got very wide soles, huge soles, big bounce. Especially this one has very big bounce and a wide sole, so that makes them very heavy. They're going to hit the ball high because the weight is at the bottom of the club and gets under the ball, sending it high, and they're 57 degrees. So the way they hit them high makes them into sort of a lob wedge, even though they call them sand irons. And I'll just give you a close-up of what they both look like. They got the double flags. It says Wilson and it says sand iron, and it's a very nice club. This one's got the original pretty long grip on it. Beautiful workmanship. Again, we got the reminder grip, which is now illegal, so I don't play this club. I don't want to rip the grip off, and I'm not gonna play it. It's kind of a brute anyway. It's like an F, I think F6 if I remember right. Here's one that's somewhat smaller, somewhat lighter, from the same era, and those could end up being something you would want to acquire. as your big bounce wedge, especially if you like super heavy, especially if you don't mind hitting the ball very high, especially if you're having trouble finding a Dynapower wedge online. There are a great many. There are just as many on eBay. You might see at any given time 25 Dynapowered wedges from the 20-year period that I've mentioned that I'm focusing on. And at the same time, you might see 20 sand irons pre-1956 for sale. The other thing you're going to see for sale are Wilson sand wedges made in the 80s and 90s called the original. And these are copies of the 1930s. You know, it's funny that they call them the original when they're copies, but I guess they mean that they are copying the original, that are, you know, similar to what were being made in the 30s with, and used by Gene Sarazen, who claims to have invented the sand wedge. I also want to mention, go back to the Helen Hicks sand wedge from the 30s. It's a women's club made by Wilson. She was a national champion back then, and Lee Trevino, I think I mentioned earlier, Lee Trevino would carry that Helen Hicks wedge in his bag to win one or both of his early 1970s Open championships, British Opens as I call them. So, you know, even back then, when you have a player like Lee Trevino, Player of the Year, I think in 1970, using a Wilson sand iron that's almost 40 years old at that point to win, it gives you an idea of the enduring value of the design, and then the quality that was built in to these very finely crafted clubs. So in the next segment, we're going to talk about my favorite combinations, the ones that I play, that go in my bag of low and high bounce wedges. There are many different combinations, and part of the fun that I've had with all of the many wedges I own is just for varying weather conditions, I flip from one to another depending on how I assess the weather here in the Seattle area. And I did the same thing back in Chicago. We were there for 18 years, and the weather is certainly very variable in Chicago. So, but I'll give you just a few of my favorite combinations, and they aren't necessarily the Holy Grail. I think I did show you my several copies of rechromed, regrooved Holy Grails. I don't carry them that much. There are others that I prefer, even though I like the Holy Grail. It hits the ball dead straight. So with that in mind, I will sign off and see you next time.